previous classes we have studied about the locomotion and movement. Now in this class we'll start chapter number 21, that is neural control and coordination. Now in our body, in any living being, the coordination and control is done by two systems, that is endocrinal system as well as neural system. Endocrinal system control or regulate the activity by various types of hormones, whereas in neural system the activity is controlled by the nervous system including CNS, PNS, etc. that we will discuss in this chapter. In case the neural system is associated with the functional and structural unit of neural system are the neurons, and they are doing three functions. First is detection of any stimuli, then receiving that stimuli, and finally these stimuli are transmitted from one part of the body to other. So all these are controlling this neural system is controlling all the activities in the body, voluntary as well as involuntary. Now in different group of organism, that is invertebrate, then vertebrates, there are different structure of neural system, although the function is the same. In invertebrates, very simple type of neural system is present. For example, in case of Hydra, the neural system is consisting of the neuron, that are the network of thread-like structure. So it is very simple. Whereas in case of insects, we can see like in cockroach, etc. This neural system consists of a brain, a number of ganglia, that is swelling like structure, and the neural tissue. Whereas in vertebrates, the neural system, nervous system is well developed and consists of various types of neurons, various types of this neural system. That is, now in human, we will start with the human nervous system. Human nervous system consists of two parts, that is, it can be divided into two parts, that is CNS as well as PNS. CNS means central nervous system, and this central nervous system includes brain and spinal cord, which are responsible for giving command and controlling whole activity of the body. All the neurons are functions according to their command. This PNS is the peripheral nervous system, which are two types, consist of two types of neurons, afferent and efferent. Afferent and efferent, and this is of two division. It can be divided into two division, that is SNS, that is skeletal, that is somatic neural system, as well as ANS, that is autonomic neural system. This SNS is associated with the skeletal system, whereas this ANS is associated with the involuntary organs, internal organs. This ANS, that is autonomic nervous system, can be divided into two types depending upon their function, that is sympathetic nervous system as well as parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system are opposite in their functioning. All these things will now discuss with the diagram. The structure of neuron, and that is, the neuron is the structural and functional unit of the nervous system, and that will discuss through the diagram as well as the functioning of these neural system.
In the previous chapter we have studied about the functioning of the muscle, whereas this chapter involves the nervous system, that is, which can be divided into two parts, that is central nervous system, which like brain as well as spinal cord, which are known as the controlling unit, whereas the peripheral nervous system, the body links to the outside of the world. The central nervous system involves the spinal cord, which is a column of nerve and between the brain and the peripheral nervous system, and brain connects to the spinal cord, that is, brain is connected through this brain stem. Now brain is divided into three parts, that is forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. Now this peripheral nervous system can be divided into autonomic nervous system, that is ANS, as well as somatic nervous system, that is SNS. The ANS regulates the involuntary body functions processes like heartbeat rate, respiration, digestion, pupil contraction, automatically occurring all the things. And this SNS carries sensory information from the sensory organ to the CNS and relay the motor commands from the CNS to the muscles, and in this way it is voluntary, controlling the voluntary movements. This ANS can be divided into two, that is sympathetic nervous system as well as parasympathetic. Now this sympathetic nervous system prepare the body for the action and stress, that is why it is known as fight or flight. But this parasympathetic calms the body and helps the body to conserve energy. That means these two are just opposite in nature. In this slide we can see different organisms having different type of nervous system. In the simple organism, invertebrates etc., it is very simple, whereas it becomes complicated in the well developed organism. This, for example, in cnidarians like hydra, it is very simple and neurons are linked to one another through a single nerve net like structure, and they only associated with the reflexes. So this is very simple type of nervous system. Then in case of this cockroaches, we can see this is the nerve cluster in head, the nerve cords, and these are the nerves. So it is little bit advanced. Now in complex organism, the nervous system becomes complicated. In human and other mammals, the brain is well developed. So this is at the top in the evolution, having different parts. So in this way we can see different types of nervous system, and that is the result due to the result of this evolutionary process. In this slide we can see the typical structure of the neuron, that is the functional unit of nervous system. This is the structure of a neuron. We can see here this is the cell body having the nucleus, and these are the branches which is present in the cell body known as dendrites. The longest structure is known as axon, and this axon is surrounded by, covered by the sheath like structure known as myelin sheath, which is not continuous in whole length, and this place where it is not present known as nodes of Ranvier, and the end of this axon is known as terminal end of the axon, and these Schwann cells are present in the axon. So this is the typical neuron structure. This is the last, the terminal point of this nerve is known as synaptic knob, and this synaptic knob having this neurotransmitter, a chemical, and that helps in the process of the sending or receiving the message. This is known as the presynaptic neuron, and this is the second one, that is postsynaptic neuron. So when this first neuron will send the signal, the other one will receive the signal, and in this way the messages will be moving from one part to other. So the message will pass from one part to other, signal will pass. So that's why it is known as presynaptic neuron. This is postsynaptic neuron. The muscle transmission, impulse transmission takes place through the three phases, that is in the resting potential, action potential, and recovery potential. This is all due to the change in the ions present on outer and internal stage. The generation or conduction of the nerve impulse occurs due to the change in the difference in the positive charge and in the inner side as well as outer side of the cell, that is exterior of the cell and interior of the cell. So due to the difference of this positive and negative charge, the generation of impulse occurs. the charge difference between interior and exterior cell called the resting membrane potential. So, in the resting stage also some potential is there and that is known as the resting membrane potential. Now, when a stimulus disturbs the plasma membrane on a dendrite, a nerve impulse begins and causing opening of sodium channels, the sodium ion flow into the cell and lessening the charge difference at that location. So, in this way the movement of this ion takes place. This slide is also explaining the generation and conduction of the neural or the nerve impulse. Here we can see the sodium and potassium ions, how the membrane becomes permeable for this. The lipid bilayer bar passes of potassium ion as well as this sodium ion. The protein channels and pumps regulate the passage for sodium and potassium ion. At rest, more potassium ion move out and less sodium ion move in. The potassium ion diffuse out and leave behind excess negative charge, that is known as sodium potassium pump. So, in this figure we can see how this sodium and potassium are exchanged between the outer side and inner side and becomes polarized and then repolarized, and hence the conduction of nerve impulse occurs from one location to other.
We have discussed about the transmission of impulses, conduction of impulses. Then now we will study about the central nervous system, that is brain, having three parts, that is forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain, having different names, different terms for different parts and how they are functioning, which part of the brain is doing which function. Through the diagram we will discuss this. Now, the reflex arc and reflex action. When we know that neurons are meant for taking the message or receiving the message of the stimuli, and these stimuli are received by the neurons from the receiving organ and then it will be transferred to the brain. So, and again whatever the central nervous system, spinal cord or brain will give the command, that command is again given back, transmitted to the receiving organ, and that part, so from the receiving organ to the brain or the central nervous system, and again the command is given to the particular part, that is the receiving organ. So, this path is known as reflex arc, and the reflex action which are taken, the decision taken, the command given by the brain and they are acting accordingly, they act, that is known as reflex action. So, it occurs within a second and knowingly or unknowingly all these things are going in our bodies. Now, this will discuss through the diagram.
This slide is showing the structure of the brain and different parts of the brain, how these parts are involved in which type of function. The front portion is known as the forebrain, this is the midbrain, and this lower part is known as hindbrain. Forebrain or cerebrum have different functions, then midbrain and hindbrain are associated with different functions. This portion is known as pons and this is medulla oblongata, and that will elongate as spinal cord. This frontal lobes here, this frontal lobe is associated with personality, social skills, judgment, emotion regulation, movement, speech, reasoning, executive function, etc. Whereas this temporal lobe is associated with memory, then this object recognition, understanding the language, art, music, speech, hearing, all these things are controlled by this temporal lobe. This parietal lobe is associated with perception, then receives sensory input, language processing, calculation, writing, reading, all these things are controlled by this parietal lobe. This occipital lobe is for sight and processing visual information. The cerebellum or this hindbrain is involved or associated with balance, learning, emotion regulation, movement, attention. So, all these are controlled by the cerebellum. Now, the thalamus is associated with the following, that is alertness, sleep, relay center for information from body to brain, depth perception, then consciousness. All these things are controlled by thalamus. The basal ganglia associated with memory, emotion, coordination of muscle movement. This is the brain stem, and this brain stem is associated with breathing, heart rate, then alertness and sleep pattern, blood flow throughout the body, motor and sensory pathways. So, in this way different parts of the brain is associated with different type of function, and they control various different types of physiology of our body. This slide is explaining about the reflex action and reflex arc. The reflex action is the part in which when any part of our body is receiving any stimulus, suppose it is in the form of heat, by the receptor organ, then it will be sent through this sensory neuron to the spinal cord. Now, this spinal cord will take decision and give command to this organ through the motor neuron, and now this receiving organ, the receptor, will be known as effector, and the response will occur. That means, suppose if we are touching any hot substance, then we will lift our hand. So, this is known as, the whole phenomena is known as reflex action, and this path from which the stimulus is taken, then received, finally it will give the response, that is known as reflex arc.